So we're going to start moving into some more financial type uses of what we've been doing so far in the course. So we're going to look at how to calculate interest on investments or on loans. So before I get into the more realistic type interest, which is called compound interest, we're going to look at what we call simple interest. Now, first of all, a little bit of background interest. Now, I'm sure many of you have bank accounts or have heard about things like paying for things with credit cards, where if you don't pay off your credit card, you have to pay interest on top of what you already owe. If you have a bank account, you'll notice that if you have a savings account, you'll get money put into your account on a regular basis, and that's just called interest. So we're going to look at how types of interest is calculated, but again, before getting the more realistic type of interest, which is called compound, you have to look at what we call simple interest. Now, in simple interest, the interest is only calculated based on your initial amount. So we call the initial amount the principal, and we're going to base the interest only on what you initially invest, or if it's a loan, what you initially borrow. Now, in real life, this is not very commonly used. Almost all the interest out there is compound interest, which we're going to be looking at the next lesson. But it's simple interest is kind of used as an approximation. If you have a very short-term loan where the compounding or the difference from compound interest won't be that much, then you can use simple interest as a kind of approximation. But it's almost sort of a simple interest is you really just use as a warm-up to get you used to how interest calculations work before you get into the more complicated, realistic type investments or loans out there. So again, if the interest is only calculated based on your initial investment, the formula for simple interest is I equals P times R times T. And what do I, P, R, and T mean? Well, I is the amount of interest that you either earn or that you pay if it's a loan. P is your principal, so your initial amount either invested or borrowed. R is your interest rate, and the interest rate is per year. So let me make a note here. R is interest rate per year. Okay, and it will be in decimal form. Okay, so if it gives it to you as a percentage, you have to convert it to a decimal. Okay, and T is your amount of time, which again is in years. Okay, so if you know how much you invest, you know how much the interest rate is, you know how long it's been invested for, you can in theory calculate what the simple interest would be. Okay, so let's just try and put that to use. So let's just say you originally invest $1,000 at 4% interest per year. Now you see this slash A here, that just means 4% per annum. So annum right there, that just really is a short form of saying per year. So this is 4% per year for 5 years. So again, let's just take a look at what we have and see if we can calculate simple interest. So we originally invest $1,000 into GIC or bank account or some kind of investment that the bank has offered. So your principal, your original investment is $1,000. Your interest rate is 4% per year, which we're going to convert to a decimal, so it's 0.04, and it takes 5 years. So T is equal to 5. So we can quickly calculate our simple interest. I will be equal to P times R times T. So P is 1,000. R is 0.04, and T is 5. Okay, so you quickly run that through your calculator, and I get $200, which means over those 5 years, if you were to make this investment, you have gained an extra $200 on top of what you already invested. Okay, so it seems pretty straightforward right now. We're just trying to figure out what values go into the equation for principal, rate, and time. So for in B, similar type situation, except now you're borrowing money instead of investing money. The interest calculation doesn't change, except now it's extra interest you owe instead of interest you get back on top of your investment. So you initially invest $2,500 at 3.75% per year, so we convert that to a decimal. The only thing that's really tricky here is remember that your time has to be in years, and I've given you 3 years and 5 months. So we gotta make sure we convert that into years. So remember that there's 12 months in a year, so we have 3 and 5 over 12 years. So you should convert that to an improper fraction, so 12 times 3 is 36, plus 5 is 41, so we get 41, it's 41 months, so 41 over 12 years. Okay, so that we would put that in the equation for T. Okay, so I'll let you do the calculation for the interest here, and then I want you to try C on your own. So finish up B, do C on your own, see if we both get the same answers, and push play when you're ready to see them. Okay, so take a quick second here and check your answers. You should get about $321.31 for your interest for B. Now, in general, with money, we're going to round our final answers to 2 decimal places because it doesn't make sense to go beyond cents, because we can't really give out fractions of a penny. So 2 decimal places is fine, so that rounds to 321.31. For C, it's the same idea. We're investing $750. That's your P. Your interest rate, convert it to a decimal by dividing by 100. You get 0.055. And the only thing, again, is you have to make sure that your time is in years. So it's 150 days. If you imagine 365 days in a year, we get 150 over 365 to get our time. So once we have all those, we run them through the equation. And again, on this investment, after 150 days, you'll get $16.95 of interest. Okay, so again, hopefully it seems pretty straightforward so far. And once you figure out what goes in the equation, it's just a matter of running it through your calculator and seeing what you get. We'll do a couple of quick more examples, and we'll just call it a day. So now we're borrowing $1,900 at 7.25% per year simple interest. We want to know how much we're going to owe at the end of 37 weeks. So let's just think this through again. So we're borrowing a certain amount of money. So at the end of the 37 weeks, we're going to owe what we invested plus a certain amount of interest. So first, let's figure out how much interest we're going to owe. So we're investing $1,900. The rate is 7.25%, which is 7.25%. Okay, so you have to make sure we convert that to a decimal. So it's going to give me 0.0725. Okay, and last but not least, for time, we have 37 weeks. So if we use the fact that there's 52 weeks in a year, that our time will be 37 over 52. So once I have my principal, my rate, and my time, I can do my interest calculation. So I have 1,900 times 0.0725 times 37 over 52. Okay, so take a second to run that through your calculator. Okay, so I should get $98.01 of interest. Now remember, that's not how much I owe, that's how much interest I have to pay. So I also have to pay back what I originally borrowed. So the actual amount that I owe, I'll call A. Okay, and to figure out what I owe in total, it's going to be what I originally borrowed plus my interest. Okay, so if it was an investment, it would be what I originally invested plus the interest earned would be how much I have in total, how much I've earned in total. But since this is a loan, it'll be how much I originally borrowed plus how much interest that went on top of that loan that I'm going to owe. So my principal was $1,900. The interest I owe is an additional $98.01. So I put those together. $1,998.01 is what I owe after 37 weeks. Okay, so last thing to look at here, pardon me, a couple more things to look at. So let's say we have an investment of $4,000 invested at a rate of 3% per year. I want you to just make a table of values over the first 5 years and think about what that's going to look like on a graph. So we originally invested $4,000, okay, and I just want you to take a minute here and for different amounts of time, calculate how much the investment is worth. So it means you're going to have to calculate your interest first. Okay, so I have to do I equals PRT for each of these. And then once you have your interest, add it to the original $4,000. So if the year is 1, I'm going to put in a principal of 4,000, a rate of 0.03, and a time of 1. So if I run that through my calculator, I will get $120. So my amount, the total value of the investment will be the $4,000 I invested plus that $120, so I get $4,120. I'd like you to take a minute, repeat that process for years 2, 3, 4, and 5, and see if we can notice any pattern in the final value of the investment or the year-end balances. Okay, so push play and you're ready to go through it together. Okay, so hopefully you should have gotten these values for the table of values. Now if you put them on a graph, I'll show what it looks like here. You might recognize here they're going up the same amount every single time, which means if you look up these values on a graph, again, what you're going to see is something linear. Okay, so because the interest only depends on the principal and not any interest on top of that, it's going to be the same amount of interest every single year that's going to be added on to the investment. So overall, your total value is going to go up by by the same amount every single year. So simple interest actually has a linear relationship. Okay, that won't necessarily be true for all types of interest, but at least for simple interest, it will be linear. Okay, so just make a note of that somewhere in your notes here. So the pattern that you see is going to be linear. And even without a graph, you can see that from the first differences here, right? You're constantly going up by 120 every single time you go up that table. So simple interest will be linear. Okay, so one last example here before we call it a day. Now, we're invested $10,000 at 3.25% a year simple interest, and we're told the account now has a balance of $12,275. We want to figure out how much time has passed. So this one's a little bit different, that we're not being asked for the interest now, we're being asked for how much time has passed for the investment to grow from $10,000 to this amount in 3.25% per year simple interest. So let's think about what we know here. So remember, our simple interest equation is I equals PRT. And let's see what we know from this equation here. So we know the interest rate is 3.25%. So we convert that to a decimal at 0.0325. Okay. I know my principal. I invested $10,000 originally. The time is what I'm looking for, so that's going to be my unknown. So in order to use this, I should know my interest. Now, this is where you have to be very, very careful and actually make sure you're reading the question, understanding what's going on. Because if you're just reading the question trying to blindly throw in numbers, you're going to say, oh, my interest is going to be $12,275. But that is actually not the case. Because remember, the investment or the account now has a balance of $12,275. So the interest is not that much. The interest is how much I gain from my original principal up to the new balance is $12,275. So my interest is going to be equal to $12,275 minus my original investment of $10,000. The only amount I've actually earned through interest is only the $2,275. Okay, that's what I get when I do this subtraction here. So just be careful you know what you're solving for here. I know that the interest is not actually the final balance, it's how much I've gone up from my original investment to my final balance. So my interest is $2,275. My principal is $10,000. My R as a decimal is 0.0325, and I need to solve for time. Okay, so I want you to solve this equation for t. Let's see what we get. So when I solve for this, I divide both sides of the equation by 10,000, divide both sides of the equation by 0.0325. I get t equals 7. So what that's telling me is that 7 years have passed. Okay, so that's it, that's all. Hopefully this one wasn't too bad. Again, simple interest is not the most realistic kind of interest out there. Most interest out there is compound interest. We're going to deal with that next lesson, but this is a nice little intro into the whole idea of how interest works, so we can sort of transition into the more realistic types of interest. Okay, that's it, that's all for today.